For a very long time, scientists thought the brain was an organ beyond treatment. If something went wrong, or if one was born with a deficit, the conclusion was tough luck. Not so anymore. There are revolutionary techniques that can lead to radical improvements in chronic pain, stroke, various forms of brain damage, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, autism, attention deficit disorder, learning disorders, sensory processing disorder, developmental delays, Down syndrome, and even some forms of blindness. Here now to tell us how this is all possible, Dr. Norman Doidge. He's the author of the best-selling book, The Brain's Way of Healing: Remarkable Discoveries and Recoveries from the Frontiers of Neuroplasticity. And it's always good to have you in that chair back here at TVO. Before we talk about the new book, because you were here, I guess, a few years ago with The Brain That Changes Itself, so let's just remind everybody the sort of key breakthrough idea of that book before we talk about your new one.
Sure. That was basically the discovery that the brain is not fixed. It's not like a hardwired machine, but the way it works is by changing its wiring. And the word that describes that property is neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity means that the brain's structure and function can be changed by our activity, what we do, and by mental experience. It doesn't mean we can change everything about the brain, but it means we can change a lot more about it than we thought.
This next example I want you to talk about is a guy you didn't have to go very far to find. Your neighbor, Paul Medall?
Oh my gosh, yeah, Paul Medall's a national treasure. Paul Medall was born with very severe dyslexia, and he, I think he failed 4 grades in a row. And at one point, he was basically not allowed to repeat any more grades, and he went off to a monastery in France, where he happened to bump into a man named Alfred Tomatis. Alfred Tomatis was an ENT doctor, ear, nose, and throat doctor, who had made some huge discoveries basically about energy in the brain. He basically discovered that you can use sound and sound frequencies to talk to the brain. Remember I said that, the brain's language is patterns of electrical information, but a number of our senses basically translate energy and information from the outside world to electrical information. Sound waves are translated by the cochlea in the ear into electrical waves, and the patterns of those waves can be translated into electrical waves. And what Tomatis was able to do was to fiddle with frequencies, fiddle with timing of using music that was modified to help people with dyslexia, attention deficit disorder, even on the autistic spectrum. And basically he was able to help Paul, who had many, many problems with dyslexia, get completely better. And Paul...
Completely better?
Yes. Yes.
So he reads normally now?
He went to the Sorbonne and graduated in psychology after basically, I think it was about 1.5 years, something like that, with Tomatis, and opened up the listening center with Tomatis in Toronto. I mean, it's an extraordinary, extraordinary place. And I've just seen, I followed about 24 patients over about 5 years. And I followed them quite closely. And the overwhelming majority of them made really significant improvements.
Can you do anything for autism?
Yes.
What can you do?
In the world of autism, we say if you've met one autistic child, you've met one autistic child, meaning that there are many different. Everyone's different. But there are certain commonalities. Many of the children with autism, you may have noticed, often cover their ears. They're very distressed and hypersensitive to sounds. And autistic children often have trouble relating. People often say it's as though they don't have a concept of other minds. They have many, many problems, including lots of inflammation throughout their bodies. We've recently discovered that inflammation extends to their brains, and it affects the connections in the brain, including the connections between the auditory cortex and the pleasure centers of the brain. Now, autistic kids suffer hypersensitivity to sounds, we believe now, because they don't have something most people have. They don't have a circuit in the brain and ear that most people have, which is an auditory zoom. When you go to a party that's a noisy party, at first you can't make out any conversations, and then gradually over time you zoom in on one or the other
You
conversation.
can filter out all the other noise.
Yes, you can zoom in particularly on the frequencies of human speech. But autistic kids can't do that. And they're left with actually very low frequencies. So basically, the training is to train the circuit for the auditory zoom for autistic kids. And like one kid I described, Timothy, at the end of the first day of the training, he had his first good night's sleep in years. He was supposed to be institutionalized. His mother says, he's in the car on the way home, his mother says, he's different. 2 days later, he hugs his father for the first time. So what's happening is, you lower the hypersensitivities, the fight-flight reaction that's always on because they're hearing these predatory sounds goes down. And also, they can't develop language because of the frequency problem. Now, there's more to autism than that. I think it's a whole body problem, and Timothy also benefited from going on a gluten-free diet, and I think he was also off dairy, as I recall. Another kid, Jordan, had the same problems, was supposed to be institutionalized, and I mean, as far as anyone can tell, he has no traces of autism left, period. He went to Dalhousie. He's very, very good with people. He's witty. He's empathic. There's literally no signs in him. You know, there are some of us who are following cases of autistic kids who've gotten better and are trying to reverse engineer how that happened.